Welcome back, Falcons fans. Your boy Bryce Lewis back at it again for more Atlanta Falcons content. And we have a lot of going on right now. Obviously, we have the schedule release scheduled to come out by the time of this recording. Hasn't came out, but we know some confirmed matchups and how many primetime games the Falcons will have. We're also going to get into what the offseason has been so far for the team, more about the recap of the draft, Michael Penix, and other things as well. And I'm bringing on a good friend of mine to come on to the show, Luke Hetrick from Channel 2 Action News in Atlanta. Hey, how are you doing today, sir?
Pricey 2K, this is a good time, man. Appreciate you having me on. We're ready to go.
Yes, sir, man. Yes, sir. I would say right now, man, I think there's a little bit of excitement right now within the Falcons fan base. Cautious, optimistic excitement, but nonetheless. Let's get into the schedule. So far, we know the Falcons have 5 primetime games, which is 10 in the last 2 years. If you remember, they had 4 scheduled, then got that one late against the Commanders. That's a lot of games in prime time for a team that, you know, I remember there was a time we really weren't getting any outside of the Thursday night game, and that's changed. What is your first initial thoughts of just the fact the league is putting the Falcons in such a spotlight?
How far have they come in the last couple of years? I mean, you go back to 2022, the memory that everyone has of them in primetime is Thursday night, the Mariota interception. And then not a primetime game in 23. I mean, that entire season, pretty much every game was in that 1 o'clock window outside of a West Coast swing. The only time they were really on that national spotlight was the London game against the Jaguars. And it didn't go well at all. It was a really poor showing offensively for this team.
Story game.
You could say that. But you look at last year, and I think what they have done, what they did a year ago, really confirmed what everyone thought about them in terms of putting them in primetime. They earned their stripes. You look at all those contests they had last year. Every single one of them, win or lose, was exciting, coming down to the wire, which is what you want, holding that attention well into the fourth quarter. I mean, the 2-minute drill against Philly, the, couple red zones, the Kyle Pitts non-PI call against the Chiefs, and then you have later in the year the game-winning drive, or the game-tying drive, I should say, against Washington. So, and then, of course, I'm just leaving out the biggest one. Why would I even do this? The Kadero Hodge play against Tampa on Thursday night. So when the Falcons were in prime time and when they were the spotlight game, they delivered. Didn't have to win all of them, but those were high-quality, entertaining games. And the league saying, we can double down on this, and we know that even with not having Kirk Cousins, which we saw in the majority of those games last year, Michael Penix, when he was in a spotlight game, he delivered with 2 big 4th down completions, went toe-to-toe with Jaden Daniels in just his second start. So I think for a lot of people in the league office, they're going, we know what we're getting with the Falcons in terms of exciting offensive football. And that's a great place to be in, and it's a credit to the coaching staff in the front office and the development of some of these players for putting themselves in a situation like this. Because 2-3 years ago, no one would have dreamed this was possible. Yeah,
man. I think too, like I said, the entertainment value, the competitive games. I think there also is an expectation the Falcons are the league. This could be also the league saying we expect you to be good this year.
Yes.
And so that obviously adds on to what this season is going to be for them. A team that knows, hey, playoffs. We got to be a playoff team this year. The 5 games that they have mentioned, 2 Monday nighters against the Bills and Rams, 2 Sunday night football games against the Vikings and Niners, which are both on the road. The Monday night games are going to be at home, and then at the Bucs on Thursday night as well. So obviously stiff competition in prime time, but if the Falcons come out on top, can really, I guess, now get the respect of the country because of the type of opponents that they're playing, especially if they're able to beat them and be taken more seriously.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, too, what intrigues it so much is they've earned the opportunity in these matchups, like we've mentioned. It's a chance to gain some respect, but there's some intrigue with the backstory here. You have the Rams matchup, Raheem and Zach Robinson against the team that they came from. Minnesota, obviously, with Kirk Cousins, and that is, much to be determined, what happens all with that. And then the Kyle Shanahan matchup with San Francisco, there's always an intrigue there. Tampa, taking 3 of 4 from them the last 2 years and still losing the division is always going to be something that when you get Josh Allen on the schedule, that is always going to be not just for the fan bases, but from a national audience, casual fan. You're tuning in for that. That's appointment television. I think that also the NFL looks at it and goes, in the NFC, the AFC is loaded with quarterbacks. We know who the stars are. I mean, you can mark down pretty much the last couple of years, Kansas City, Baltimore, Buffalo, and Houston, because they have the 4 best quarterbacks in the division. And then you throw in your Joe Burrow, your Tua, your Justin Herbert, whoever. You know what you're getting. The best teams typically have the best quarterbacks in the AFC. And the NFC is a different story. Outside of Jalen Hurts, who earned his contract, won his Super Bowl, has the credibility to his name, which he earned, I thought, far before the Super Bowl. But now you're looking around and going, okay, we have Matthew Stafford. Brock Purdy's in a contract negotiation right now. Hey, Michael Penix is a guy with a lot of intrigue to his name. The Falcons obviously delivered in prime time. Is this the guy? Because we didn't get a chance to see J.J. McCarthy last year. We don't know what we're going to get from him this year. We don't know what Caleb Williams is going to turn out to be, how that works under Ben Johnson. So what we have so far is let's roll the dice. The Falcons delivered. There's some storylines here. And in the NFC, we're trying to find that next crop of quarterbacks. Michael Penix Jr. can absolutely be that guy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a lot of expectations that come with him and just what they expect, which we'll get to him in a little bit later in the show.
Right.
I do want to ask you this. Also, one of the leaks that we've heard or that have been confirmed leaks is that the Falcons will open up against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You mentioned beat them 3 of the last 4 times they've played, but Tampa Bay still won the division the last 2 years. Is obviously it's the first game of the season. A lot of football left to be played after that, but is there a sense of urgency from week 1, just knowing this is the team that people will project you're going to be battling for the division title with?
Yes and no. I always look at it where any division game, absolutely want to win. It's double the importance of it. But how this schedule broke down the last couple of years, those Tampa games came typically, between weeks 5 and 11 or 12. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of football to be played after that. And I think when you play certain teams, where you play certain teams absolutely matters. What we thought when that schedule came out a year ago is, oh my gosh, if the Falcons can come out of those first 5 games 2-3, 3-2, the schedule sets up so favorably for them. Mm-hmm. They were 6-3 after the Dallas game in week 10. And then we thought with the way that schedule was going to break, this is a team that should get to 10 or 11 wins. And it didn't happen. So sure, there's urgency because it's a division game, because Tampa has won the crown the last 4 years in the South, but still you have to take care of business beyond that, which they have failed to do outside of the division.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously going to be something they're going to obviously try to change this season. Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of just the entire season, we know who they're playing. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask if you have any, as of right now where the team sits, if you have any, I guess, early predictions on how you think this season will pan out for the Falcons.
I think baseline, without looking at the schedule, obviously we're doing this at a certain time, so we don't have the advantage of knowing, like I said, who and when and where. But I think on paper right now, this is a baseline, a 9-win team. And I say that knowing what they had last year, and that's not, saying I don't think they're very good. I'm just giving baseline expectations because with very poor defensive performances down the stretch last year, but really throughout, and just having wild inconsistency, the quarterback play really only getting quality games out of Kirk Cousins for 4 to 5 weeks, having him then nosedive from a production standpoint, you were still able to get 8 wins. I think this is a 9-win team because they have addressed certain issues, obviously not knowing the schedule, what it's going to look like. But offensively, now having Michael Penix, I think those 3 games were so critical for him last year just to get reps, just to get out there and see how it goes. And they had no fear in having him let it rip, throw the ball down the field. There was no fear, no limitations, nothing with his game. He was able to shake some cobwebs, and he was able to make some mistakes. Now, he's going to continue to do that, but how I look at it is he now has an entire offseason. So look at that tape, to take a step forward, to have more continuity in Zach Robinson's system. And Zach Robinson now has a guy that he can say, okay, I can move him around a little bit more. There was nothing outside the pocket with Kirk Cousins last year. He ended up being a statue really for the entire season. You can do a little bit more with Michael Penix Jr. I think this offensive playbook expands a little bit more. And just from that standpoint alone, and not having Jimmy Lake as a defensive coordinator and upgrading with Jeff Ulbrich, I think at a minimum, this is a 9-win team. And I think it can only go up from there. But without seeing the schedule, that's where I'll baseline it. But my expectations for them are much higher than they have been in years past.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm in the same boat. I'm thinking baseline. My baseline was 10. Like you said, obviously, once we see the schedule, we'll see how things line up. We'll see what certain matchups line up. But I think, obviously, for them, 10 won the division last year. So I would say 10 to win it again, it would be the same way this year as well. So now talking about what you mentioned about some of the upgrades that they've made, the draft was a big point for a lot of people. A lot of people were very, for at least from what I've seen across reaction from Falcons fans, very people are very excited.
Yes.
You address the pass rush, you add Jalen Walker, you add James Pierce Jr., you add ball hawks in the secondary, Xavier Watts, Billy Bowman. I think a lot of people feel like even with such a limited amount of picks, they did as much as you think they could do with them. What was your overall impression of the draft that they had and how you think they may be able to impact the defense this year?
I think what their draft pick showed is they're leaving no doubt. 2024, the pick last year with Michael Penix, everyone was going and saying Dallas Turner. They need edge. We've known that for a while with this team with their lack of pressure on the quarterback, near the bottom of the league in sacks, QB pressures, everything like that, hits, whatever you want to say. But it's like, hey, you need new tires on the Chevy, but you go out and get the sports car. And you do that in Michael Penix Jr. No one's going to complain about that. Everyone likes a sports car. It's great. And it works. But now you have really addressed the other needs around it. And I think this is Terry Fontenot saying, with the trade that he made to get back with James Pierce in that first round, is saying, whatever with that pick, man, you do what you want with it. I am rolling the dice because I don't know what my future is beyond this. I don't have to worry about it because if you're asking me, I think this is his last, really his last chance to make an impression on this roster. He hasn't had a ton of production in these drafts, but what it did with this one was erased all doubt and said, we understand our flaws, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. It didn't work to the level that people thought it would with Justin Simmons last year. They let the pass rush go. They tried to get creative, moving Caden Ellis around. And that's what I love with those first two picks. You have your traditional edge rusher in James Pierce Jr., has the body. I think he'll fill out a little bit more, but just from a physical standpoint, checks all the boxes. Jalen Walker was highly productive coming off the edge, and I think it speaks to him just as a football player and an IQ standpoint that he could go from playing in the middle to the outside, and the transition was seamless for him. That's where I look with Jeff Ulbrich, and he can go, we can get a little more exotic now. We played, and if you look at the defenses between the Jets and the Falcons last year, New York was in their base and in nickel much more often than Atlanta was. But to do that, you need to get a little bit exotic and have some versatile pieces. And on Atlanta's defense last year, it was Caden Ellis. Now you add in Jalen Walker. You're allowed to be a lot more multiple. You can do creative things. He's a high IQ player. So to me, that was what was most impressive about this draft. And it's the fact that so many fans were like, we got him. Like, he was there for us at 15. And we all knew if he's there at 15, no one else in this draft is better. And to go back up and get James Pierce, this is saying we get it. We know where our shortcomings were. We have a defensive coach that we believe in, that Raheem Morris trusts, that has been in Atlanta, was there for 5 years before, is a veteran guy, not some guy getting his first crack at NFL coaching in Jimmy Lake. Now you're saying, we're giving you the tools. You go to work. And that's why I think Falcons fans were so excited. It was obvious. They knew it. And they didn't just make one pick. They were hyper-aggressive in it. And that is what stood out to me about it.
Yeah, and I think, on top of that, you add those guys in, you get Lance Floyd, former Bulldog himself. Now, even at older age, he's still productive.
Yes.
He's still productive. You get Braylon Trice back. Obviously, for him, there's not as much pressure on him because coming back from the ACL. So, but he's a guy that they may also get some production from as well. And so I think with those things aligned and across the defensive line in general, because they are going younger, there's a lot of young, talented pieces, and their defensive coaching staff is relying on the coaching to get these guys where they need to be. So there's a lot of potential boom bust with it, obviously, depending on how fast they come along and how the communication still is across the entire defense. But they have leaders, I would say, in each unit of their defense that can help along. But I think Floyd will probably be extremely important, just not on the field, but also in the locker room, helping those guys come along.
I think it's a great point because you need that presence. And where Raheem Morris excels is being that player's coach. And when he wants to roll his sleeves up and get his hands dirty and go into a specific position group, I think that's where he is really, really good. So having Leonard Floyd in there takes a lot of pressure off him. But you also, like you said, Braylon Trice, bringing him back, understanding what he's going to be. This is a true rookie season for him. Having AK on the roster, and then James Pierce and Jalen Walker. There are pieces to work with, and those guys that we mentioned before. You don't have a TJ Watt or a Micah Parsons or a Myles Garrett, but you got guys that can play, and you got guys that you can get creative with. And that's what I really like. And you talk about them getting younger. They had to. You had a lot of veteran pieces up front. And when they were getting gashed at the rate they were, you had no other choice. So where we sit here and say we like the move, I think it was the obvious move to make. And they are very high on Rook. And that was clear. Reaching for him in the second round last year. I shouldn't say reach, but taking him in the second round last year in the manner in which they did. And then all these other pieces, development of Zach Harrison, Brandon Dorless, guys like that. I think you're going to see a lot of young guys take a step forward, but it's necessary for them to take on that leadership role. And bringing in a guy like Leonard Floyd, I think was a smart move. They tried to do that last year with Matthew Judon. I think it was a mistake, cutting ties with Bud Dupree, who was a more productive player instead, and a guy that really wanted to truly be in Atlanta. They chose to move off him and bring in Judon, and they swung and missed. So they go get Leonard Floyd, a guy that wants to be in Atlanta, a guy that wants to be here. And I think it was a smart move all the way around.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, too, you heard Raheem and them kind of talk about how they're going to be intentional with the rookies. Mm-hmm. I've said that the vibe of this class kind of gives me the vibe of the class that they went to the Super Bowl with. Remember that one had a lot of rookies playing immediately. And it seems like that's that same situation. Because last year, a lot of people criticized how a lot of the guys they drafted really weren't playing immediately. And so do you get the same sense? I'm not saying that, do you get a sense we're going to the Super Bowl with the rookies playing? What I'm saying is, do you get a sense that maybe that this draft class could have a similar impact to that class?
Yes, because I look at it, the background of these guys. Never taking a Georgia Bulldog in the first round. Kirby Smart churns out defensive talent. We know that. We understand it. It finally lined up for this team. So we understand that. Xavier Watts is coming from Marcus Freeman, one of the most highly regarded defensive minds in college football. Billy Bowman coming from Brent Venables, one of the best defensive minds, a very creative, a guy that has a lot of creative schemes at the college level. You're getting those pieces, guys that are high IQ, that are coming in right away. And now Raheem gets his hands on them and gets to mold them and do what they want and put them all over the field. I think there's going to be some growing pains, but as we've seen this learning curve for rookies, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, it's a lot quicker than it was, 6-8 years ago, let alone back in 98. So I think there are some similarities to this team. I think they just got guys on that side, yes, that can play. Yes, that, have big play potential, but just guys that don't make a lot of mistakes and guys that are extremely consistent and coachable. And that's what I like about, those crop of picks.
Yeah, and I think with that, that leads, like I said, to a lot of excitement as well. And there's also some undrafted guys who people also think could make the team, do some things, and maybe compete for some positions. So I think overall with the class that they've brought in, I think people think there's immediate chance for impact and an immediate route for that. And so it leads me now over to the offensive side of the ball. As we kind of already touched on a little bit, Michael Penix. This year for him will be, obviously his first full starting year. A guy with a lot of expectations. People know he can make all the throws. And just he will be key to the Falcons making that next step. I've brought up the question of, could you see Michael Penix run a little bit more this year? Just because I think he mentioned it last year before he started playing, it's the league, guys are fast. I got to, and he runs 4.5, 4.4. So it's not like this guy's slow.
No.
But overall for you, what do you think of Michael Penix coming into this year? And what are your expectations? What do you want to see from Michael Penix when he hits the field?
I'm not going to put a number, and say it's X amount of yards, X amount of touchdowns. I just want to see the command. And I think he showed that in so many spots last year in just the 3 games. You had limited reps. He's coming in big spots. And he didn't play against world beaters defensively when you look at New York and Carolina and Washington. But the fact that they just let him go out there and rip it, that was what was most impressive to me. So I think this year you're going to see him be on it, from the jump. And that, to me, with the pieces that he has around him, another year with Drake, Darnell Mooney, Bijan, all these pieces, the late round pick, and then the name is slipping me, and I shouldn't have it slip me, but on the offensive line. And I don't know why it's slipping me.
His last name is Nelson.
Say that again.
His last name's Nelson.
Yeah, but having that and shoring up the offensive line, because I thought one of the big things that they needed to do was make sure you have his blind side protected. And you can have your thoughts on Caleb McGarry, whatever, but just making sure you have that policy in place for Michael Penix Jr. But for me this year, man, my expectations are really high for them, and for Michael Penix Jr. in particular. I love what I saw out of him. I think there's going to be, as I mentioned earlier, just more of a movement outside of the pocket. Not a ton of designed runs, but just more getting him out, getting the ball out quickly, because we know he can send it. And he has the pieces around him to go downfield. But I think you're going to see more of an effort to be multiple, to get him outside the pocket, to get him on some naked boots and everything like that, because he has the talent to do it. And I just think this guy, the ceiling is sky high. And what they have around him, and just having an offseason with Zach Robinson, because you saw it last year. To an extent, they were handcuffed what they could do with Kirk Cousins, getting him back on the field after the Achilles, and then having the, say what you want about it, the injury, midseason and beyond. It was clear he was not the same quarterback. It was clear that he could not do certain things, and they were limited in what they could call and what they could run. You don't have that issue at all this year with Michael Penix Jr. So I do expect to see this team be on it right from the jump.
Yeah, and I think, too, for him, I've always said that, he's a guy who I feel like the city's kind of already embraced.
Yeah.
We can talk about the do-rag and, that symbolism for him and everything, but I think they've embraced him. I think he's embraced the city. I think he's a guy who's going to put in the work and do what he can to help everybody be elevated. Because it's like one person we haven't mentioned is like Kyle Pitts. He mentioned Kyle Pitts. He wants Kyle Pitts to have a great season. Obviously, there's a lot of questions around him, but he wants to say, hey, let's see what me and him can do for a full season, especially with him having the ability, because this is probably the best quarterback of arm talent that Kyle Pitts has had probably his entire tenure. So we'll see if that impacts him. I think people wonder, is this a year Drake London breaks through, maybe makes a Pro Bowl this year? Bijan as well, just because I think they think he can help with some of their games. I would also expect to see Bijan in more receiving routes. Don't be surprised he catches some down the field. Is that fair assessment for all the guys across the board?
Oh, I think completely. I think with Bijan, the play that still stands out, and I always joked about this, because what he did his rookie year was just really impressive. But if I got to wear the black hat here, I will. What I always remark with Bijan is he's great at turning, 3 into 7, 5 into 10, 10 into 15 to 20. But you never saw that, hey, I made one guy miss and I'm house call 60 years. You just, and that is not saying I don't think he's great or anything like that. It's just the one little red X, because he took care of the fumble issues last year. He got better from that, but just, making that big play. But the play that stands out, and I'm talking in circles here, is that wheel route against New Orleans in week 18 in his rookie year. When you got it to him in space and he was just gone, I think you're going to see more intention with him in the pass game, because you can rely on that bowling ball that is Tyler Algier. I think Drake takes a step forward, but the guy that I was most impressed with last year was Darnell Mooney, taking so much pressure off Drake, because that just didn't happen the year before. Whether you say it's a Desmond Ridder thing or Arthur Smith or whatever, they just did not have a legitimate other weapon outside of Drake. And you can talk about the progression or the lack of it, or the, whatever you want to say with Kyle Pitts. It just wasn't there. And until he does something to change our minds, we can't look at it and go, we're expecting rookie year Kyle Pitts to be out there. It's not going to be the case. You expect him to be a guy to have 50 catches and 4 to 6 touchdowns. And is that bad on Kyle Pitts? Is that bad? That's just what it is at this point. So until we are given any information to believe otherwise, that's what we can expect out of it. Mooney and Drake are the two big pieces of this offense. Their ability to stretch the field, how they were able to be in sync with Michael Penix Jr. very early, and it was clear that once you got to that Washington game, they were in a rhythm. And that's what makes me so excited. So what about Washington's defense? I get it. But once you saw that to me was he's got his two guys. He's got his Evans and Godwin. And whether that's a bad comparison, given that it's in the division, whatever, you have two legit guys that you can do a lot with on the outside. That's what makes me most excited, because he had 3 legitimate receivers in college, and he used them. And now he's got 2 studs at the X and Y.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the reasons why some people have even had high expectations, saying, could he be an MVP conversation? I won't go that far, but the offensive talent is there to have a really strong year for sure.
Yes. Amen.
So,
Preach.
I think it would be exciting to see what he can do this year. I'll have one last question and I'll let you go. Is there any player on this team that you are just like, I am super excited to watch play? Or is there a guy that you think, hey, people aren't talking about him, but he might, turn some heads?
It's a great question. It's a really good question. You know what? I'm going to go with Rook, because you have the impossible task, man, of being the guy up front now that you parted ways with Grady. One of the most beloved Falcons, a beloved figure in this city, not just what he did on the field, but what he was able to do at the microphone and then out in the community. They are so high on Rook. And we get that, and we saw the flashes. And to me, now having a legitimate DC that can develop him and they can use him in a variety of ways, I think you do have a lot of talent, young talent, and I should say more potential up front. And to me, he's the guy that I want to see break through. I thought it was going to be Zach Harrison more last year, and it just didn't turn out to be the case. Was that coaching? Was that role? That's all up for discussion. Rook, to me, is the guy that I am really excited to see, just because that piece of that defense really was an Achilles heel in a lot of ways, just not able to get any type of push. They got gashed in a lot of games last year. That's what I want to see, and he's a guy that I'm circling.
Yeah, definitely. And I think
Who are you looking at? Come on, man. You fire out the questions, and you're great at this. Let's put it back on the host.
I got you. I can do that. Let's see here. I don't want to do like some obvious start, but I will say this: I am excited to see what Xavier Watts does from Notre Dame.
Good.
I'm really excited to see what he can do, because I think people have said he's basically Jesse Bates light, the way he plays. Not the most athletic guy, but very instinctually, that's where his strong suit is. Diagnosing plays, making the right play. Like you said, just not a lot of mistakes.
Right.
And so I'm excited to see how that looks, because, Bates is someone you can kind of let roam. You can kind of let him just kind of, Ed Reed-ish type of play style. But Watts is some guy who can diagnose, help keep people in line, and he's going to be learning from Bates.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens in a couple of years when Bates' contract is up. But guy who was immediately getting that mentorship from him and maybe groomed him to potentially take over the defense if that time ever came.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see how he does in the secondary this year. And because, realistically, I've said that the way they've formulated this team now, it's like they want to get pressure, they want to get sacks, and if they can't get to you, we can maybe rush a throw, and then we got ball hawks in the secondary who can make a play. And then if they can create turnovers, that obviously is a great way to win games in the league.
It's a great point, too, because the excitement so many people have with Xavier Watts, and even Billy Bowman to an extent, is eerily similar to what they were saying about Richie Grant. I covered Richie Grant in college. I was there for 2 or 3 years with him. I thought that was a slam dunk pick in the second round by Atlanta. The guy made no mistakes. He was the Jesse Bates of a really bad defense in college, and it just didn't work when it got to the NFL with how they played defense at that time, whether it be, I'm not pardoning Richie Grant at all, but, never had the same defensive coordinator in back-to-back seasons. But the way they like to play a lot of man, specifically under Ryan Nielsen at times, lack of pass rush, Jesse Bates takes his risks. Someone's getting burned over the top, and usually it was Richie Grant. I don't think you're going to see that. That's why they had to address that front seven over the last couple of years, and they have in theory. So now you get a guy like Xavier Watts, who you say coming in has the coaching, has the structure around him. They've taken care of what they needed to up front, and now you allow, like I kept saying all the time, you leave no doubt. You give him a fair chance to go out there and make plays and just do his job. That's what's exciting to me about it. And I think it's a great point that you make.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, all these guys, rookies in the class this year, I think can make an impact. I mean, Billy Bowman's right there in the midst of a very tight competition at nickel with Clark, with D, competing for that spot. But like it's almost like you almost talk like, hey, like he really might have a real shot there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's just important to have the depth of that position as well, and a guy who can play different things. I know they say he didn't have. I think his missed tackle rate was a little higher, but at the same time, he's a guy when he can't get a good hit on you. Big hit, great turnovers. Because that's the thing about what they got. They got guys who turn the ball over in college. And even Kobe Bryant, the undrafted free agent from Kansas, who some people thought would be an early day 3 pick and went undrafted. I think he had like 11 interceptions. So like you clearly see the archetypes of players they want and the type of defense. Because I feel like with Jeff Ulbrich, he has a plan and a vision for what he wants the defense to look like. I felt like with Jimmy Lake, there wasn't a vision. It was I have a system. You guys play the system. Let's see what happens. And then that's why I said the entire defense regressed. And I was like, I get if a couple of players regress. The entire defense, that's a coaching issue. So I'm really excited to see how Jeff implements that plan with those guys.
And let's remember, Jeff Ulbrich the last couple of years, Coach Sauce Gardner. Sauce Gardner's cornerback tandem his last year at Cincinnati, Kobe Bryant, who was highly productive. So this is a guy that Ulbrich knows very well, has watched a lot of tape on, studying Sauce and everything. I think that's a guy that has a shot to make the roster, has a shot to make some noise even as well.
Yeah, exactly. And even, we were talking before the show, but I was just like, also, I'm really big on Nick Nash, San Jose product. He was a Biletnikoff finalist, Triple Crown in college football. Some people say, well, he played at San Jose. Listen, at the end of the day, if you hoop, you hoop, and I even went back and looked at some games and some stats, and I was like, well, top 10 USC team had 3 touchdowns, over 100 yards. I believe the 3 out of 4 ranked, 5 ranked teams he played, and he at least had like 5+ receptions and a touchdown in all those games. The only game he wasn't good in was UNLV, but the entire team was bad that game. So, I mean, people think not a fast guy, which is why he went undrafted, but body catcher, good route runner, good hands, someone who some people think he could compete for that 4th receiver. Some even say maybe 3, because Ray is not like, some people think Ray is not just like nailed in there. Somebody might be able to come take that spot. So, and that's what you really want from the camps and what you want from guys is if you can find those gems who can just, fit what you want to do it well, and then maybe you see potential for them. Boom. Now you're getting steals, and now you have more flexibility across the board. And that's something obviously every team would want.
Look, I'm smiling, and I do appreciate the breakdown there because I thought on Nick Nash it was spot on. But you hoop. I mean,
exactly.
That's perfect. Put that on a mug. I love that. I'm gonna start using that. I'll trademark it for Bracey 2K.
Yeah, listen, Brad. Because I always remember how they said they evaluate small school kids. They said, "Do you dominate at the level?" That's the first thing I want to see.
Yep.
So, and I was like, "Well, Nick Nash was hooping." So, and he's a former quarterback, so he can see the game differently than most because he actually played quarterback first. So that can also help him out. So I think, I think overall this team has a lot of people that you're excited for. It's just a matter of how does it look on the field and how does it mesh together. That's going to be the key.
I agree 1,000%. I do have one question for you, and I don't want to go cross the platforms here, but
you're good.
Fill in the blank for me. With 13th pick, the Atlanta Hawks select.
I'm crying. Listen, I don't even have a firm pick right now at that spot. Like, I've seen a bunch of names, but I really don't know. First, I don't know because we don't have a president. And second, I don't know because it's one of those things where it's like certain guys that drop to us might drop out of the top 10, but then there's certain guys that might not. I've heard Murray Boyles from South Carolina. I believe I forgot his name. I saw his name rising up. He's from Duke, I believe. Oh, he's transferring to Duke, but they think he's going to stay in the draft. So, because he had a really good showing at the combine yesterday. I wish I could remember his name right now.
Boogie Fland? Was it Boogie Fland from Arkansas?
Boogie solidified. Boogie solidified. Let me see real quick. Oh wait, all right, I'm on the wrong thing. But I think a lot of people are looking at a potential wing, a guy who's a wing or a big. Obviously, a lot of people would probably want a backup center realistically.
Yeah.
And obviously, listen, that's a whole discussion about Yeka Okongwu that I would love to get. Oh, Cedric Coward.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah. That's who I was talking about. So he's another name. So I mean, all those picks could happen. I've heard some Danny Wolf. I've heard some Danny Wolf in there. I don't know if I'm taking him at 13. I might take him at 22. But
I don't know if I'm taking him even at 22.
Not taking Danny Wolf. You're not a fan.
I like what I saw, but some of the foot speed, man.
No,
it is a concern for me. You know, he's such a smart player. I get it, but he doesn't do it. I'll say
it. Center.
Second coming of Mike Muscala.
Come on, not Mike Muscala. Hey, listen, he was in the league for a long time.
Love Moose and his LinkedIn. Love Moose.
I'm crying.
Dude, back to the basket, pick and pop, always reliable.
Yeah, I mean, shoot.
I'll go bold. Because we got another, 4 or 5 or 6 weeks to the draft.
Yeah.
Walter Clayton.
You're going Walter Clayton?
Sipping the Kool-Aid.
Walter Clayton. Wow.
I'm sipping the Kool-Aid. I'm on it. And the only reason I say that is because of Trey's usage rate with the lack of production when he was off the floor, not having that other bona fide. And look, I'm not just saying, you plug in Trey with a Trey type, but to me, a guy that could just get a bucket and you can run the offense through and not have to worry about these lulls. Put it out there.
I've seen his name rise, especially during the NCAA tournament run. I've seen his name rise up and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where if they do it, that probably means you're not bringing back Karis LeVert. I'm assuming. But I don't know. Again, with no president, I have no idea what the direction and plan is. They may get a new president and it's like, hey, take these picks and get them out of here. I have no idea because that's a whole thing. And they talking about agents.
And this is for the next. And this is for the next podcast. This is for the next. This is for the next edition.
Hey, listen,
might be taping that in a week. We don't know. Huh? We might be taping that next week.
Bruh. It'll be breaking news. Finally found a president. Now we get a reaction. Everybody might be pissed off. It sounds like everybody gonna be pissed off anyway.
Press conference is gonna go exactly how you think it's gonna go.
Yeah.
Big word salad, nothing said. That's how it's gonna go. What it is.
Everybody's like, I hate Tony Wrestler. You know how it goes.
We got our bingo cards out. We're ready. We know what's coming.
We really should. Y'all should make like a bingo card for every reaction said.
Every reaction, every question, every tweet. We know what's coming.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I'm curious for sure. But I think because we have 2 picks, you got to go into a full scouting mode and see who the heck they may want to select with those picks if they keep them. Because the draft's before free agency, so which is interesting for the NBA. So like you're almost projecting before you even get to free agency if you're going to even like what guys you may want to go after. And
I know this is a Falcon show. I was ready to give a bold Hawks take. I'm not doing it yet. I'm not doing it. This isn't the platform to do it. I'm not gonna do it. Once I get to believe Hawks.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that's what we call tease in the biz, and that's just me trying to promote my guy, helping out.
Appreciate you.
This ain't first take. I'm not just throwing spaghetti at the wall to try and get ratings here. I'm trying to help my man out and be authentic at the same time. And I'll do that.
I'm here for it. Definitely appreciate it. I mean, I remember our end of episode conversation last time. So I mean, this is where you just get to the. This
is where things get off the rails.
Exactly. It's just 2 guys talking sports, man. That's all it is, man.
That's what we are. That's what we do.
Yes, sir, man. So, but nonetheless, I appreciate you, Luke, for coming on, man. Sharing some of your wisdom with the audience today, man. I think they love you. So, where can people find you so they can keep up with you?
I say they love me because I don't got any hate mail yet, but I don't get any mail for compliments either. So I appreciate it.
My burner account.
Yeah, exactly. No, I appreciate you having me on. And for those who want to follow me on X at LH Sports TV, on Instagram at Luke Hetrick, and then TikTok. I'm on there every now and then at Luke Hetrick as well. Because why not? Bryce, appreciate you as always, man. Thank you for having me on, and we got a lot more to get into with these birds.
Oh, for sure, man. For sure. A lot of exciting things coming. Definitely, like I said, I've told people expecting to be back at training camp again this year, so I'll be able to get a little up-close look personal with the team.
Mm-hmm.
See how that goes. But I'm Bryce. That's Luke. See you next time.